Long before history was written, long before language carved itself into stone and song, there were patterns, shapes that repeated, stories that echoed, faces that returned over and over, wearing new names, speaking new tongues, but carrying the same essence. They were not created, they were remembered. We call them archetypes, not because they live in books, but because they live in us. The hero, the mother, the sage, the rebel, the victim, the trickster, the ruler, the martyr. Each one a facet of the great human prism, each one a mask worn by the infinite to play at being finite. You were born into them. Before you had a name, you were already moving toward one of their scripts. Before you knew what it meant to be you, you were already entering a shape traced 1,000 times before. Because that is how this world has moved, through pattern, through repetition, through the great story retold, with new actors, new costumes, but the same breath. We have lived through ages of archetypes. We have become them, and they have guided us. When we didn't know who we were, we became the hero. When we were asked to sacrifice, we became the martyr. When chaos reigned, we invoked the ruler. When all seemed lost, we found solace in the wise one, the sage who whispers from the cave within. The old mythologies were not just tales of gods and monsters, they were maps of the psyche, blueprints, templates, ways of becoming when the soul forgets itself. Archetypes gave form to the formless. They helped us navigate the unknown by reflecting it in the mirror of the known. And for a long time, they worked. They provided meaning. They gave rhythm to the chaos of being. They allowed us to belong to something bigger than our personal stories. But here's what we forgot. Archetypes are not eternal. They are scaffolding. They are training wheels. They are thresholds, not destinations. They are tools for navigating identity, not containers to be trapped inside. And yet we've worshipped them. We made the hero into a god. We made the mother into an ideal. We made the warrior into a virtue. We made the martyr into a requirement. And slowly, what once liberated us began to confine us. We stopped evolving through them. We began repeating them again and again and again. Different wars, same warrior. Different religions, same savior. Different revolutions, same rebel. We began mistaking the costume for the soul, the mask for the face. But something in us knew. Something ancient beneath the archetype has always whispered, there is more. Not more roles, not more stories. Something beyond the story. A presence untouched by narrative. A beingness that doesn't need a pattern to give it shape. And that presence is stirring now. It is why the old forms feel heavy. It is why the stories no longer satisfy. It is why the archetypes, once so vivid, now feel distant, hollow, like echoes in a cave we've long since outgrown. We are reaching the edge of the archetypal age, the edge of the myth, the edge of identity. And we are beginning to see what waits on the other side. But before we step across, we must turn and look back, not with judgment, but with reverence. Because those patterns carried us here. They built bridges from the unconscious to the conscious. They gave us a way to know ourselves through story, through symbol, through shared humanity. The age of archetypes was not a mistake. It was a chapter, a sacred, vital chapter. But like all stories, it must end, so something new can begin. And we are nearing the final mask, the last symbol, the final form, before the form dissolves. You did not choose your mask. It was waiting for you. The moment you entered this world, crafted by lineage, reinforced by language, stitched together by expectation and myth. Before you could speak, you were already being shaped, held in invisible hands, molding you not into who you are, but into what the world could understand. A daughter, a son, a warrior, a thinker, a caretaker, a threat, a promise. These were not roles you earned. They were inherited, passed down like heirlooms, worn like sacred garments, even when they scratched at your skin. Culture does not ask permission. It installs the code. And that code is archetypal. In every tale you were told, in every movie you watched, in every bedtime story or holy scripture, there were patterns forming in your psyche. The brave one, the wise one, the pure one, the broken one. You learned without being taught who gets love, who gets silence, who gets punished, and who gets forgotten. And so, like all of us, you adapted. You wore the mask that fit best, or the one that earned the most safety. And in doing so, you began to drift. From self to structure, from essence to identity. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in whispers. You learn to speak a certain way, to feel only certain emotions, to sit still when your soul wants to move, to smile when your spirit wants to scream. This is how the mask tightens. Not out of malice, but from generations of forgetting. Your parents wore masks, so did theirs, and theirs before them. Each generation passing down not just trauma, but archetypal bindings. And here's the difficult truth. Much of what we call personality is inherited roleplay. We are not born knowing we are the hero. We are told we should be. We are not born craving martyrdom. We are taught it is sacred. And slowly, the soul adapts. It hides in the corners. It waits for silence. It weeps in dreams. Because deep within, it remembers something else, something formless, something that doesn't need a script to feel real. But in a world addicted to roles, that formless self is dangerous. So we bind it. We tell it to wait. We numb its voice. We decorate the mask until we mistake it for our face. But the soul does not forget. It waits and it watches. And as the inherited mask begins to crack, as the old archetypes fail to explain why you feel so lost in the middle of success, why your body rebels against the image you perform, why no role seems to fully fit, the soul steps forward. Not with a shout, but with a tremble. It begins to unweave the mask, thread by thread. You lose interest in the game. The applause feels hollow. The praise feels distant. You start to ask dangerous questions. Is this really me? Who am I without the role? What was here before I was named? These are not small questions. They are keys that unlock the prison of inherited identity. And once they are asked, the structure begins to dissolve. You begin to feel not broken, but unwritten. Not empty, but spacious. Like a canvas that has remembered it was never a painting. Like a sky that suddenly outgrows the clouds that once defined it. And still, the world will try to pull you back, to reassign the mask, to offer a new one, shinier, more spiritual. The archetype of the healer, the mystic, the light worker, the new sage. But if you've walked far enough, you'll see the pattern. You'll see the trap in new clothing. And something in you will say, "Number not this time." Not because roles are evil, not because archetypes are wrong, but because you've begun to feel what it means to exist without a container. And that is the most dangerous and holy act of all. to live without a mask, to walk without a title, to be unfixed. This is not the end. This is the threshold, where the soul begins to prepare itself for something it cannot yet describe, for the collapse of everything it thought it was, for the emergence of the last human archetype, the final image, the final form. Before the image dissolves into something we have no words for yet. But it's coming, and some part of you already knows. There comes a time in every myth when the gods fall silent, when the temples crack, when the fires dim, when the symbols lose their weight and the prayers echo without answer. Not because the gods have abandoned us, but because we have outgrown the shapes we once gave them. This is the moment we now find ourselves in, not as individuals, but as a species. The old gods are crumbling, and with them, the archetypes they carried. The hero, once our champion, now limps under the weight of endless struggle. We've followed him through countless wars, crusades, revolutions, origin stories. But now, we feel the fatigue. We no longer believe in conquest. We no longer cheer at the slaying of dragons, because we've begun to wonder, were the dragons ever real? The Savior, once our light in the dark, now feels distant. We've placed too much upon his shoulders, too much hope, too much avoidance. We asked him to carry what we refuse to face. And now, when he speaks, his voice is hollow. Even the sage, the keeper of ancient truths, seems uncertain. His scrolls feel heavy with dust. His wisdom echoes in empty halls. Because this world has changed, and the old maps no longer fit the terrain, we are witnessing the collapse of the mythic architecture that held our psychic world together. The hero's journey has looped too many times. The villain has worn too many masks. The lover has become commodified. The martyr romanticized. The rebel exhausted. The archetypes, once vibrant and alive, now feel like faded statues, crumbling under their own symbolism. We've begun to sense it. The story is ending. Not the world, but the story about the world. And with its ending comes a deep and disorienting grief. Because even as the old gods fall, we feel their absence. Even in their dysfunction, they gave us meaning. They told us who we were. They offered structure, direction, shape. Without them, what are we? The psyche begins to wander. We scroll endlessly. We consume faster and faster. We search for new myths, new models, new symbols. But nothing sticks. Nothing resonates. Because the soul cannot be fed by repackaged versions of what it already knows, we try to resurrect the old forms, recasting the hero in new costumes, reframing the savior as science, painting the sage in digital light. But it doesn't work, because something deeper is shifting. We are not in need of better versions of the past. We are being called to release it. And releasing a myth is not like changing a belief. It is a death, a sacred unraveling, a letting go of the stories that once made us feel safe. But here is the truth we rarely speak. The archetypes were never meant to be permanent. They are bridges, not destinations. They carry us across stages of becoming, but they were never meant to define us forever. And now, we are reaching the final crossing. The scaffolding is falling, the mask is peeling, the fire is going out. And yet, beneath the rubble, beneath the smoke, beneath the silence of these collapsing gods, something stirs. Not a new archetype, but a presence untouched by myth, untouched by story, untouched by all the forms. we once clung to like lifeboats in a storm. It is not a role, it is not a character, it is not a pattern. It is something that has watched patiently from behind the veil for lifetimes. And now, its time is coming. But before it can rise, everything false must fall. This is the apocalypse the soul has long anticipated. Not destruction, but disclosure. The end of illusion, the crumbling of inherited form, the sacred space left behind when the mask drops to the floor. This is not a loss. This is an opening. And through that opening, the last archetype begins to emerge, not to lead us forward, but to take us beyond. It doesn't arrive with a name. It doesn't speak in prophecy. It does not come riding thunder or cloaked in revelation. The last archetype emerges like mist on still water, subtle, unavoidable, unshaped. Not a beginning, not an end, a threshold. It is not here to lead you into another story. It is here to dissolve the story itself. This archetype does not belong to any tradition. It has no counterpart in myth. It was never worshipped, never feared, never written in stone, because it was never meant to be understood, only felt. It stands not on the stage of the psyche, but just beyond the edge of it, in that strange territory where symbols lose their outlines and meaning unhooks itself from form. The last archetype has no shape, and yet it shapes everything. It does not wear a mask. It stands in the space after the mask falls. And when it arrives in your life, you do not feel power. You do not feel clarity. You do not feel reborn. You feel empty. Not broken, not lost, but suspended. As if the floor beneath the roles you once played has vanished. As if the scaffolding has been pulled away, and all that remains is breath and stillness. This is not regression, this is the crossing. The last archetype is not a figure, it is a function. It appears when the soul has exhausted all other forms, when the warrior has laid down their sword, when the teacher no longer speaks, when even the mystic turns silent in the face of the unnameable. This archetype lives at the edge of image. It is the one who holds the fire, but does not carry it forward. It is the one who steps aside, so presence can emerge without form. It does not teach, but its silence rearranges everything. It does not fight, but its stillness disarms illusion. It does not heal, but its being unmakes the wound. You don't become this archetype, you pass through it. It is the final echo before the return to source, the last contraction before the self unfolds into beingness. And yet, when it moves through you, something sacred awakens. A strange peace, not comfort, but release. You stop trying to be someone. You stop searching for signs. You stop translating your existence into story. Instead, you stand still at the center of the spiral and let everything else fall away. This is what the last archetype teaches. Not how to become, but how to unbecome. Not how to rise, but how to vanish into presence. You no longer seek reflection, because you are no longer projecting. You no longer fear death, because identity has already died. And you no longer need guidance, because there is nothing left to follow. You are not above. You are not below. You are between. And in that space, the archetype dissolves. Because it was never a being, it was a door. And now the door is open. There is no pressure to walk through it. There is no promise, no reward. Only freedom. The freedom to exist without definition, without narrative, without mask. The freedom to be, beyond the need to be anything. This is the final threshold of human myth, the last silhouette before the sky clears. And what lies beyond cannot be told, only stepped into. It begins slowly, not with thunder, not with lightning, but with absence. The things that once mattered don't. The mask you wore feels tight. The name you carried sounds distant, as if it belongs to someone else. You wake one day, and the edges of your identity have begun to blur. Not from despair, but from something deeper. Something quiet. Something final. This is the trial of disintegration, and no myth prepares you for it. Because myths are for heroes, and this is the space after the hero lays down their sword. This is not the death of the body, it is the unraveling of the personality, the dissolving of the scaffolding that once held together who you thought you were. Your ambition, your image, your roles, your wounds, they all begin to feel like borrowed clothing, like dust on glass, like echoes of a language you no longer speak. You do not become nothing, but everything you thought was you begins to fall away. And it is terrifying, because the self does not go gently. It clings, it bargains, it tries to rebuild, to reattach, to find a new identity to wrap around the silence. But the silence remains. This is the sacred dismantling, not because you are broken, but because you are remembering who you were before you were anyone. And that memory requires space. So the structure must fall, piece by piece. The mask, the narrative, the performance, gone, until only breath remains, until only this moment remains. You may feel empty, but it is not a hollow void, it is the clearing. It is the space the soul prepared, so something unnameable could finally take root. And still the in-between is brutal, not because it hurts, but because it offers no reference point. You can't go back. You can't go forward. You are suspended, weightless, unanchored. And in that weightlessness comes the temptation to grasp for meaning, for role, for something solid. But nothing solid comes. Only light, only stillness, only the slow inward pulsing of the real self reassembling, not as a structure, but as a frequency. You are not becoming someone new, you are becoming transparent. The old constructs fall away, and what remains is not a person, but a presence. Not a thinker, but awareness itself. Not a doer, but the field in which doing happens. And the mind, trained in form, cannot understand this. It will cry loss, it will cry death, it will cry nothingness. But the soul knows. It has waited lifetimes for this moment. The moment where it can finally emerge, unfiltered, unmasked, unbound. This is not a phase, it is a right. And you will not be the same after. Because what is reborn is not a better version of you, it is the end of versioning itself. You are not your story. You are not your growth arc. You are not your healing process. You are the space within which those things arose. And now that space is no longer hidden behind persona. It is coming forward, breathing, listening, waiting for nothing. This is what comes after the last archetype. Not a new identity, but identity dismantled. Not a higher self, but the self dissolved into what has always been here. And the beauty is this: Nothing was added, nothing was achieved, nothing was attained. Only the false was removed, and in its place, a silence so full it vibrates, a being so still it radiates, a self so absent it becomes everything. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are becoming space. And in that space, the post-archetypal begins to bloom, not with force, not with clarity, but with something far more powerful: presence. What emerges after the fall is not a new role, not a new title, not a better mask. What emerges is presence. Not the kind you perform, the kind you are. The post-archetypal being is not heroic. It does not strive. It does not seek. Because it no longer needs to become, it simply is. Not in abstraction, not in some remote inner sanctum, but here, in this body, in this breath, in this strange and luminous now. The post-archetypal being is not an ascended master. It is not above life. It is within it, utterly, absolutely, quietly real. It does not escape the world. It becomes so intimate with it that all separation dissolves. It walks the same streets, washes the same dishes, listens to the same winds, but something is different, radically different. There is no someone doing it anymore, no internal narrative, no tension of becoming, no effort to sustain an image. The center has dropped out, and in its place, stillness. Not passivity, not disengagement, but a presence so complete that nothing needs to be added. There is no goal, no calling, no myth to fulfill. Not because life is meaningless, but because it no longer needs a story to be sacred. The post-archetypal being is not an idea. It is not a vision of the future. It is what you are, when everything that is not truly yours has fallen away. When no one is left to be enlightened, when no one is left to improve, when no one is left to fix, perform, chase, or pretend, there is just being. Not neutral, not cold, but vibrant, effortless, alive. This is the paradox. When you stop trying to be someone, you begin to embody something so vast, so natural, so complete that it cannot be reduced to a label. You become a mirror in which the world sees itself clearly. You become a doorway through which reality touches itself. You become a vibration that resonates with life because it is no longer filtered through resistance or identity. There is no need to inspire, no need to teach, no need to serve. And yet, everything you touch begins to awaken. Not because you intended, but because your presence reminds others of what they too have forgotten. You no longer say, "This is who I am." You say nothing, you radiate. And that radiation is more honest than any word could be. You do not fit in, but you do not stand apart. You simply exist on your own terms, terms written not in belief, but in resonance. You are not a character in the human drama. You are the open sky beneath which the story unfolds. The post-archetypal being is not above humanity. It is deeper into it, deeper into the pulse, deeper into the breath, deeper into the sacred strangeness of this brief moment we call a life. And the most startling realization of all, there is no climax, no final initiation, no secret revealed, no great reward. Just this, a life lived from centerless truth, from the natural unfolding of what is when you no longer need it to be anything else. And that is enough, more than enough. It is the thing we've been looking for through every myth, every mask, every ritual, every story. It is not beyond us. It is beneath us, within us, as us, waiting, always waiting, to be remembered not as a symbol but as a state. And now you are beginning to live it. There is a design, but not the kind written in code, etched in destiny, or foretold in stars. This design has no lines, no beginning, no map. It is silent, and yet it shapes everything. The post-archetypal being does not follow instructions. It does not walk a predetermined path. It moves in response to something deeper than thought, desire, or vision. It moves by resonance. That resonance, the subtle hum behind all form, is the silent blueprint. It is not a plan. It is a frequency, a tone your soul knows, but your mind cannot translate. It doesn't tell you what to do. It attunes you to what already wants to happen. And as you align with it, your life begins to flow, not in patterns, but in pulses. You stop chasing signs. You start feeling currents. You speak less. You listen more. You act, not from reaction, but from recognition. There is no grand revelation, only a subtle shift. You begin to notice that what you are is not a self, but a signal sent from the unnameable to the known, a signal that carries not instruction, but invitation. You are not here to solve. You are not here to succeed. You are here to vibrate at a frequency that unlocks something in the spaces you touch. You become a tuning fork for a new human template, and the signal you carry isn't taught, it's remembered. The blueprint was not written for you. It was written as you. But only in silence can it rise. This is why noise feels foreign now, why crowds exhaust you, why language at times feels too slow. Because the blueprint you carry doesn't speak in words, it speaks in being. Your presence begins to organize the field, not by force, not by intention, but by coherence. You enter a room and the energy shifts. You sit with someone in pain and their system starts to untangle. You say nothing, and yet something ancient inside others begins to stir. This is not power, it is remembrance. A mutual remembering that happens not through teaching, but through transmission. And the more silent you become within, the clearer that transmission flows. This is what it means to live the silent blueprint. Not to build something new, but to become what the world doesn't know it needs until it feels it through you. You are not here to create structure. You are here to seed vibration. Others may not understand you. They're not meant to, because the signal you carry is not meant to be understood. It is meant to be felt. It skips the intellect. It bypasses belief. It lands directly in the soul. And that is enough. You don't need to know what it's doing. You don't need to control it. You simply need to remain attuned, to live lightly, to move cleanly, to let each moment reattune you to the subtle pulse that exists beneath the surface of everything. You are not following the blueprint. You are the blueprint in motion, in surrender, in transmission. And through you, a different kind of humanity begins to whisper into form, not as philosophy, not as belief, but as vibration, one life at a time, one breath at a time, one quiet frequency that says, without sound, this is also possible. There is a moment, not in time, but in unfolding. A moment where even the most subtle identity melts, where even the sacred silence feels like another shape ready to fall away, where even the witness, the one who has watched, who has waited, who has listened, begins to dissolve. This is not death. This is not awakening. This is something deeper. This is the moment when form lets go of itself, when the blueprint fades, when the signal rests, when vibration ceases to search for response, and all that remains is being. Not as a noun, not as a state, but as an isness, so pure, so vast, it cannot be located. It cannot be owned. It cannot be named. It is not the self. It is not the soul. It is not the story. It is before all of that. It has no desire, no memory, no history. It simply shines. And in that shining, you remember what you truly are. Not the one walking the path, but the field in which the path appears. Not the archetype, nor what comes after, but the space where all archetypes arise and dissolve. What comes after form is not for the mind. It cannot be described. It can only be entered. And even that word entered is not quite right, because you were never outside of it. You have always been this. You simply forgot. In the act of becoming, you forgot you had always been. In the act of identifying, you lost the thread of what needed no identity. And now, you remember. Not through thought, not through conclusion, but through absence. An absence so full it pulses. An emptiness so alive it begins to speak without words. This is not where the story ends. This is where the need for story dissolves. This is not enlightenment. It is the falling away of the one who wanted to be enlightened. This is not transcendence. It is immanence, so complete it forgets to separate itself from anything. And when you live from here, there is no longer a question of how. There is no mission, no role, no vibration to maintain, no state to preserve. Only the flowing suchness of now. You eat, you sleep, you breathe, you love, not as someone, but as life itself, playing itself, through itself. You have not become more, you have become transparent. The light moves through you, the world moves through you, and nothing sticks. There is no longer a you to hold on to it. And yet you are more intimate with the world than ever before. You cry without story, you laugh without reason, you touch without separation. Because all form is now seen as expression, not division. Even fear, even anger, even loss, they arise and dissolve within the same stillness that holds galaxies and atoms alike. You are no longer trying to live from your essence. You are the absence of obstacle through which essence lives. And when people meet you, they may not understand, they may not have words, but something in them will soften. Because they are not meeting a person, they are touching the formless, the eternal behind the temporary, the clear light within the veil. You are not here to prove anything. You are not here to model perfection. You are simply here. And this here-ness is the doorway beyond becoming. This is what comes after form. Not a destination, not a next stage, not a final upgrade, but the return to what never left, the unfolding into what was always present, and the quiet, miraculous realization, there is nothing left to become. There is only this, and it is enough.